Namaskar. This is my continuing lecture on Marxist feminism. We talked about liberal feminism, then we talked about Marx's most central concepts in Marxism: use value, exchange value, surplus value, and so forth. But the most important thing for us to remember now is Marx's concept of history, how history moves. We talked about base and superstructure, that's Marx's model, and history moves through a contradiction between the base and the superstructure. What is in the base? Modes of production and relations of production. Modes of production can be tribal, hunter-gatherer, agricultural, landowner, peasant, feudal, serfdom, capitalist, industrialist. Socialism can also be industrialized. What are relations of production? Relations of productions are relations that we are involved in with each other, dependent on the fundamental mode of production. Here, someone is a hunter, someone is a gatherer. They both need each other because they can't do each other's work. Division of labor, basically. Here, it's the peasant and the landowner, and here again, it's the serf owner and the serf, and here again, it's the employer and the employee. Remember, wage labor is only true in capitalist system. Before that, there was no such thing as wage labor because the serfs were controlled, the labor was completely controlled by the owners of the serfs. So this is more or less, it's a very simple depiction of Marxist theory of history. Now, let me introduce to you Marxist feminism. The person that I'm going to talk about is Heidi Hartman. She's one of the prototypes. There are others, but we can't talk about all of them because we don't have that much time. So Heidi Hartman. Heidi Hartman introduced a feminist theory called the dual systems theory. What do I mean by dual systems? So what she did, let's go back and look at this one more time. It's a base superstructure model. What is in the superstructure, if you remember? State, religious institution, culture, everything else, civil society. Everything other than the mode of production and relations of production for Marx is on the superstructural level, but they're determined by the base. In the tribal state would be a reflection of the tribal mode of production. Tribal religion will be a reflection of the tribal mode of production. Similarly, capitalist state will be a reflection of the capitalist mode of production, and capitalist culture will be a reflection of the capitalist mode of production, and so forth. Heidi Hartman does not contradict the base superstructure model. She almost keeps it intact, but she splits it in the middle. That's why it's called the dual systems. It has two sides. Her interest is not so much tribal, agricultural, or feudal systems, but it's more capitalist system. She says in capitalist system, which is the first time we have wage labor, people sell their labor in the market. It was not that the market was not there, but this is the first time people go and sell their labor in the market. And they get in return wages. They don't get food and shelter. This is not serfdom. There is no such thing as slavery. Well, there is, but institutional. And she takes that base superstructure model and she analyzes capitalist system. She says this exploitation of labor. What is the exploitation of labor? We talked about this earlier. The creation of surplus value, that is giving more labor, getting less in return, creates class society in the superstructural level. So in the base level, the exploitation of labor creates class society. This part is more or less Marxist. Although she is a Marxist feminist, Heidi Hartman, dual systems. On the other side, she says the special exploitation of women's unpaid labor, which upholds the entire society, is responsible for patriarchy. For the first time since I started this lecture, we are getting a little definition of patriarchy, which is not enough. We'll see that later. So what is patriarchy? It's not a structural base. It's in the superstructural level. It's a byproduct of the exploitation, unpaid labor of women. Where is this unpaid labor that goes into the capitalist system that's not accounted for? Domestic labor, household labor, child rearing, child bringing up, the entire species. And of course, writing in the 1970s, she didn't write about sex working, which was always part of the exchange value. She never wrote about it. Perhaps it's little bit of prudeness on her part. But this exploitation of women's labor and this whole substructure of women caregiver, taking care of elderly, taking care of young children, basically upholding the entire system of families, that is upholding patriarchy here. So it's a dual systems. This is Marxist feminism. Why? Because it keeps Marxist base and superstructure intact, but it splits it in the middle. And on one side, she explains, following Marx, why class society is possible because of the unpaid surplus labor created by the workers. There is always more labor given in a nation than the return. But this is the unpaid labor given especially by the women as a class, which is responsible for patriarchy. So now we have a definition of patriarchy. Is this acceptable by all Marxist feminists? No. There is Ferguson and Folbray who says that this is not acceptable by everyone, because what she says is that exploitation of women forms the basis of capitalist system. Ferguson and Folbray, they're also economists, they're also dual systems theories, but they don't agree with this model, and we'll come to that in my next lecture. For today, that is all. Namaskar.